RevOps, where the learning never stops. Hosted by Sandy Robinson, she's leveling up your ops. From data to deals, she reveals how AI really pops. Real talk, real playbooks, no fluff, just jaw drop. So plug in, turn it up, let the insights flow. You're tuned to AI-Powered RevOps, now let's start the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to our first episode of AI-Powered RevOps. Today, I'm joined by someone who is truly pushing the edges of modern RevOps and BizOps. It's Amani Phipps. Amani is the Director of Business Operations and Analytics at Bonusly, where he was recently recognized as one of the 2025 Top 40 GTM leaders, a group spotlighting operators who are actually moving the needle on growth. He's known for blending systems, thinking, empathy, and a very futuristic view of how operations should run. At Bonusly, he's turning partnerships into real revenue channel and leading change on building AI for every employee in the company, including tools like Bonusly GPT that put data insights directly into the hands of the team instead of behind an ops ticket. If you're trying to figure out what AI-powered partnership-led RevOps actually looks like in the real world, this conversation is for you. Amani, I'm so excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sandy. And I'll also say, shout out to you, because you were also a part of that top 40 leaders list, and you're absolutely amazing in the space. I am incredibly excited to talk more about all things AI, the new version of ops, and the fun that's to come in the conversation.
Well, great. Well, before we get started, I gave you a little intro, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background, industry, things like that.
Yeah. So again, Amani, I am currently based in New Jersey and likely moving into the New York City area in the next few months. Background, I've always been a nerd. That is me, true and true to the core. I started working on my own company a decade ago at this point in time. I quickly realized at that point I didn't know enough about all that it took to build a business, and I sought out to learn everything that I could. It took me through the financial side after I did my master's in finance and explored the venture capital side. While I loved it and I really appreciated working with thousands of founders over the years, I really realized there's so much more to learn in the business than looking at the business. That transitioned me to working within earlier stage organizations. I joined a tech startup called Main Street. Had a amazing time, and that was my formal introduction to RevOps. This thing that I'd been doing for years because I'd been using HubSpot for 3 to 4 years prior to that organization. I just didn't see it in this light. And from there, I transitioned to Bonusly, where I've been for almost the last 4 years now, which is time is flying, but it's been a really fun journey. So today, more of my time is spent thinking about what does this next chapter of our organization really look like, and how do I play a role in it?
I love it. I love it. And I don't know where to dive into the finance, the masters, or moving from New Jersey to New York. So we can circle back to that later. One thing I wanted to ask, and I'm going to ask every guest, is tell us a little bit about one personal interest that maybe your work friends don't know about.
Yeah, so a lot of my work friends know that I love to travel, but they don't know I love music. Really deeply
Mhm.
appreciate music. There's something so special. There's certain playlists that I've been curating for years because those sounds capture really interesting moments in time. But I also want to play it more. So I used to play piano, and now I'm getting back into it. It's one of my hobbies that I need to ensure that I put time into. But that creative side allows me to bring that back into the professional in a number of different ways, but also just fills me with a lot of joy. So that is my fun fact. The team currently doesn't know, and when they see this, they will.
Love it. I love it. Did you learn as a kid, like when you were little?
Yeah, yeah. So I started not formally learning, but I did just get a Roland and I would just play. I think that's inherently been my approach. Now that I think about it, I've naturally been a builder because I just tried it.
Hmm.
I figured out keys. Hey, this sounds like this. Was I reading sheet music? Absolutely not. But I could understand this sounds like this and this sounds like here. And as I continued to play songs, it was really, really fun. I stopped for several years, especially once I started college, and I hadn't picked up another piano since. But once I was stable here, I realized I have to get back to the hobbies that I think are really interesting. I just got my new piano and I'm excited to
Mm.
dive into it.
Awesome, awesome. You're motivating me to pick the guitar back up. So I'm
Nice.
staring at it right here. So I have it out. But yeah, it's all about making the time. Well, talk to me a little bit about RevOps. So you gave me a little bit background on how you got into RevOps. But what are you doing now? Like, what's happening at Bonusly? What are you working on? Let's dive in.
Yeah. So now is a really interesting point where we are in the doing phase. I think there were 2 or 3 months ago when we realized, hey, we want to become an AI first business. You first start with saying it, but then you actually have to do it in a structured
Hmm.
and systematic way. And a part of that is shifting how does our ops team actually operate? And that's the prerogative that I have right now. We're currently changing my role and my responsibilities to think a lot more about what does it mean to be AI first? What standalone tools, what integrated solutions, and what custom solutions do we need to have? When do we buy versus build? And for our team, I'll say internally, we build first. There's this chart where on one axis you have growth and value, and on another axis you have the time and effort that it takes to go and deploy these things. And for us, there's an inflection point where the value is high enough, but the effort is too big for us to go and do, in which we need to go and buy something. But today, we're spending a lot of our time building, and
Hmm.
that is naturally how we've learned. So most of my day to day is you mentioned it before, this cool tool called Bonus GPT that launched in July the 19th of
Okay.
earlier this year. We've seen several thousand questions come to Bonus GPT from users across the entire organization, and we currently have 8 going on 9 probably tomorrow core prompts, which we treat almost as agents, but we're getting to that next step of how do we allow individuals to access the information that they need to go and act in the way that moves the business forward, while also ensuring that we can continue to build these tools in a way that, and I'll be excited to dive into this as we continue the combo, that do the actions all the time.
Hmm.
And that is where most of my time today is being spent in thinking about what does RevOps 2.0, 3.0, right, the next version of ops within our business actually look like.
So a lot of people that are listening, so I consider you an early adopter, right? You've been ahead of the curve on everything, I think, in RevOps and really learning how to leverage and deploy and build chatbots and things like that. So if somebody who's listening, you know, they like how did you start that? Like you came
Yeah.
up with the idea, like how did you get it going in your company? Because it may seem like there's a okay, that sounds like a great thing we could do, but how do I even get going?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that are really interesting in how do you start. One is that it is the smallest action. Just do something. I
Hmm.
I mentioned this earlier. There are standalone tools, and these are the tools that they have their own site. You can just go to them. You're fine. These are your Chat GPTs, Gemini's, right? Rocks. You look at the integrated solutions, and these are the tools that are popping up in the tools that we use every day. Whether it's Gong or Fathom or HubSpot or Salesforce, great. They have this new AI feature that's being baked in here, baked in there. Then you have the custom side.
Hmm.
Yeah, how we started was, and I'll give a lot of credit as well to Jeremy Thomas, who is our SVP of engineering. We are the only two people at this point who are actively working together on building Bonus GPT, which is a customized solution. Where I started was simply learning. And the learning became much broader than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was learning and using things like ChatGPT. They're really easy,
Hmm.
one. But I realized I had to learn a lot more about data structure. I had to learn a lot more about computer science. And I took a lot of time to do things like Harvard's Intro to Computer Science that came out 2.5 years ago. It is free on YouTube and it is a 24-hour course. But it was fun to think about do how do computers work, right? What is code and what is it doing um, for a computer? When I think about how do you need to think about building a solution, refactoring, and technical debt, like what does that actually mean? The next step for me was application, and my approach might not be everybody's approach, but my actual advice would be to start as simple as possible and think about what is one thing that you do in your job today, and could ChatGPT do it? Of course, you choose the model of your choice, whether it's Claude or Gemini, like whatever makes the most sense. But we encourage people to just start using things. I went on this journey for a couple of months where I committed myself to trying a new tool every day, something.
Okay.
I eventually got to this point where I said, okay, instead of just trying something every day, I want to actually understand it. So I want to choose one or two tools and use it for the course of an entire week. This is where I got into vibe coding and using Lovable and Replit. This is where I got into interest in Sora and Sora 2. This is right. The Nano Banana is really interesting. You look at Figma Make and all these other tools that are out there, test them. And it end,
Hmm.
Lindy, the workflow tools, just to expose yourself to what is actually out there. Eventually, you get to this point where you converge on what are all the possibilities or more possibilities that I know. There's hundreds of different AI tools and they're coming out constantly. As you expose yourself to enough, you start to think about how do these tools work? What is the friction with these tools? And which can I actually integrate into my workflow today? Just for me. Eventually, you get to a point where you think about what is impactful for my teammate or my peers or the organization. And that's what brought us to Bonus and GPT, where we realized that it's clear people obviously need access to data. And the easiest thing for us was customer data and product usage, because most organizations have that well articulated in their code. And JT started with building out a two prompts that could allow individuals to understand customer data, which was huge. And the second was like, what features happen in our product? Why is this not working? Why is this bug occurring? Why is this user not seeing this within their instance? Oh, it's because this setting is actually not toggled, right? There's a real story in the data, but you quickly realize that the data has to be really good to get yourself to a point where you can continue to move on to the next thing. So rolling back, that recommendation is start simple, but just start. Learn,
Right.
expose yourself to the ecosystem, and allow your mind to work in the way that it already does, but invite your mind the opportunity to think differently after you've been exposed to something new.
Yeah, and I love how you're intentional about it. I think that is a huge takeaway because just like anything new is change management with yourself. So you have to step outside of your comfort zone and try new things. And in putting together this podcast, my whole approach to it was I'm going to create everything with AI and I'm going to learn new AI tools. I learned I had a subscription to Gemini Pro with my workspace account. So I started diving into that. And you mentioned Nano Banana, and that is like my new favorite tool because it just makes the most fun images. But the other piece is like, you're right, like in your daily life. My stepson, who's 27, was just here and he has agents for everything in Claude to manage his life. And he was showing me how he's having them report back to him on how everything's going, like throughout the day, his whole life. And he's like, this is how I optimize my daily workflow. That's just how he operates. And so it was really like a mindset shift for me. So I was thinking about just what you're saying in how you then can apply that to work and what you're doing at work and revenue operations. And you found a problem, right? Having access to the customer data and then understanding things that are going on with the product, which I think is just a huge, like on the support side, use case as well. I'm just, my wheels are turning here for sure. um, so you started with those areas, you made those prompts. How did you, like you said you were working with engineering, and obviously you have a technical background. You said yourself you're a nerd. So you can talk to these folks and partner with them. How did you really go about that, and how did you get the buy-in at Bonusly to start trying this stuff?
Yeah. How do we go about it? We started with talking. I'm glad that we had. So to your point, it is one thing to try projects in your own time that don't pertain to the business because within the job there are these core KRs that I have to go and accomplish, and I can't let those go. And working on this stuff, there was this period of a couple of months where this isn't priority, not yet, because we haven't formalized it. I'm grateful that our CEO was really bought into optimizing with AI and becoming an AI first organization. And we were taking time to actually think about it. How I started was inserting myself in the conversation, but also encouraging everyone else in the organization to do the same. We did the simplest things that we could. Set up an AI chat so people can talk about different things that they're doing and using on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of this, especially early, was entirely unrelated to work. It
Mm-hmm.
was the fun and whimsical question of, hey, I was randomly working on this personal project and I asked the AI to do A, B, and C. It did it, but it did it wrong. I asked it to correct itself, and then it said it corrected itself, but it was also wrong. And I spent so many hours doing this, but it's fun to see what was actually happening. And what we found were most of those conversations were with the engineers who are using
Mm-hmm.
Cursor or any of these other vibe coding tools to go and do and build personal projects that they didn't necessarily have time to do. And that was a big upside. Is I can
Mm-hmm.
prompt something in and AI will work while I'm working on the next thing. Now, the over about a month, people started to materially see the impact of these tools, especially as more stakeholders were using Bonus GPT, and that's where I'm also grateful. JT was open and saying like, "Hey, this is how we set this up. Fantastic. Go and build things." And I spent a lot of time, a lot of weekends and late nights getting to just build. And the first
Mm-hmm.
one was great. Go and create a HubSpot and Gong prompt. But first, I needed to get HubSpot and Gong data into a central place. I was just testing. Tested with ChatGPT. They have the natural connectors for HubSpot without an MCP. You can access that information and just test. Well, what can I find? Then I realized I have to treat AI like a teammate. And if
Mm-hmm.
I was hiring somebody to go and do this job, because the thing that I didn't say is there are a series of tasks that you see need to be done. And then you have to ask yourself, do I or the person who is currently doing them need to do it? That
Mm-hmm.
is where you find yourself in the place where things like, hey, how do you update deal properties on a opportunity associated, well, based on the context from a conversation that just happened in a call? How do you do a sales forecast? How do you get relevant information for the ask that you typically get? But that's how we started. JT was building things that he naturally experienced in his day to day. And I was building things that I naturally experience in my day to day, which allows us to expand this model. But then we had to go out to say, well, what are other people seeing? And what is the most useful next thing? And it's a big part of my new role that I'm working into is to think about what are all the processes across all the teams. When I think about the people team, it's like, well, great.
Mm-hmm.
There are particular recruiting letters and comms that need to go out as we're hiring new people. Like, there's a lot of automation that can be applied there. When I think about how do you at some point develop a board deck, probably use
Yeah.
these tools to go and do this because all the information is actually there. But there's a real path to get that
Right.
incredibly well, an extensive amount of training, the appropriate evals to ensure that that data is accurate, and a lot of testing to think about what is the context you actually need to give a
Mm-hmm.
tool to go and do this job in the way that it needs to do this job. So
I
that's
mean, you just said board deck, and I think every RevOps person's had a trigger that happened at that point. But it's so huge what you're pointing out here, because I mean I probably spent 25 plus hours on our last board deck, And I'm thinking about that all the time. How could this be automated? If it's repeatable or even close to being repeatable, there should be a way to do it, right? And you going back to what you said, I want to because you said a lot. You started with you have to treat them as an employee, and I wanted people to really understand that because you really have to think about onboarding. You're training them like you're training an employee. They're going to get better, right, over time. And having your team are the people on your team and the agents on your team really, and how are you deploying those agents and how are you training them, and continuous improvement, right? And so those basics and fundamental, and you've said this a number of times, where's the data and what does the data look like? Because for that's one thing that hasn't changed with any AI. If you're putting it on top of garbage, you're going to get garbage out. So I just wanted to double down on those things because I think they're really important, because we want to move fast. There's going to be pressure. There's going to be pressure to, get things deployed and get things out. But there's risks too if you don't do it well, because you could be turning out more garbage. So have you run into that? Like how have you what kind of stumbling blocks have you hit as you've started to go down this journey and from that?
Yeah, a lot. You said something really great that, to your point, these AI tools are continuously learning, and then you stamp the really important part is that it is our job to do it. And
Hmm.
it's an easy thing to miss that part. Great, AI is consistently evolving, A, B, and C. But when you build a tool that is incredibly tailored to your organization, you have to be the one to continue to support how it scales over time. And of course, it's going to look a little bit different if you just go and buy a new tool, but it's still the same. You have to give it some level of context and hope that it continues to do this job well. But it's not just launching it, it is the monitoring after it's launched. It's those micro iterations in the output that ensure that there's a seamless user experience, because a lot of this
Hmm.
feels like a product role, if I'm
Hmm.
honest. There is the initial evaluation of like, what do the stakeholders want? What is the impact that this new feature or this new release is actually going to have? And once you ship this, how do you ensure that it isn't, interfering with any other of the features of your day to day? And RevOps' stakeholders have always been the people on our teams. That still is true, very much so. And when we think about the points of friction, that's one of them. Enablement.
Hmm.
You can launch a tool. I can go and launch 15 new prompts this week. That's perfectly fine. And this tool would have the ability to do so much more than it does. The challenge is, and you said this earlier, change management. Every time you adopt a new tool or a new feature or a new functionality, people need to understand how to use that thing.
Hmm.
And you'll acknowledge that some stakeholders can think differently and then do differently. Others need to first do differently before they can actually start consistently thinking differently and get exposed to these tools to see, oh, this is an actual possibility. Now I have this idea. Would it be possible to do A, B, and C? And that gets us this roadmap where we have a vision for what we want to build. Stakeholders have aspirations. They can feed them to us, and you have a similar type of a product loop. When I think friction, it is the honesty that if you haven't been doing an impeccable job of setting up incredibly clean data, you will notice it very
Hmm.
quickly in the outputs. When I put together some of these earlier models, I realized, hey, things like in Gong, all the trackers aren't relevant. They all are, right? There's work to continue to do. And these are a lot of the things that tend to fall off unless you have a full and a comprehensive team to go and do it, because they take a lot of time. But
Hmm.
when I first started prompting, I realized I would say, hey, what is a pain point that a prospect is having? Well, did you articulate how to identify prospect versus the user? Okay. Two, did you give it context on how to find a pain? I can't just assume that it knows what a pain point is for our business, who our competitors are, unless I gave it that appropriate context. There's a lot of fun in how much context can you give? Parsing
Mhm.
through transcripts in any query takes a lot of time. If I go into Snowflake and I'm writing SQL and I'm querying a table, and that query takes me 50 seconds because it is an enormous amount of information, right? Every gong call that over the last we've had going for 6 years, give or take. There's a lot of conversations in there. But if I have to
Right.
run that entire table, it's going to timeout. And that
Yeah.
happened very often when we were testing within GPT, that it would start answering questions, but then it would time out.
Mm.
You get into the fun of how do you choose the right prompt? Because how this model works is a stakeholder asks a question. We have code that discerns what type of question it is. And then based on the type of question, it says, hey, this is a sales question. It needs to go to these sets of instructions. Hey, this is a product question. It needs to go here. This is a data question. It needs to go here. It's a reporting question. It needs to go here. The issue is, in many cases, stakeholders tend to ask a lot of questions that fit into different buckets. Well, if you ask me, I have the context to just go and say, oh yeah, I know that this answer's here, this answer's there. Here's the security piece. This is how our product works for this, and this is how this works. But the model needs to also know that. And writing in that code in a way that doesn't involve failures or bugging is there's a lot of trial and error. And I'm grateful that we're just a fast moving organization and we're willing to accept that friction. And that was
Mm.
an incredibly important point is what is the acceptable friction where we can just launch things and say, if you see a problem, tell us. Because odds are we can go and fix it relatively quickly. And if we can't, then we'll diagnose deeply and then come back with a fix and we'll go from there. So when I think about the friction that we had, it falls into take the time to clean your data. It has to
Mm.
happen. You can prompt around it, certainly. The early tests were great. Instead of using this and this and this, you're only secluded to this information or that information or that information. But over time, that doesn't scale because then we
Right.
continue to give it additional context as opposed to fix the root and then point it in that direction and allow it the give it the appropriate logic and context to know where to look for what information and think about when was the last time that you updated all of your property definitions within Salesforce or HubSpot? That stuff matters because our tool
Right.
needs to read the property definitions. And I was like, that is always on the bottom of the list.
Right. Yeah,
And even if that,
documentation, all the definitions, all of that stuff, right?
so there's so much friction that's going to come in this, and that's okay. It is worthwhile because it teaches you so much. And again, thinking like an employee, if I were hiring an employee and it was incredibly difficult for them to learn how to do their job, then I have work to do. And it is on me to go and do that work. And that's the approach that we've taken here.
You mentioned the feedback, so it sounds like you have some sort of chat channel, Slack channel. You had one in the beginning for, hey, what cool things are we doing with AI? We have one. It's how I AI, right? We do it on Fridays and things like that. And so you have that, but for feedback as you're rolling things out, do you have another channel, like so people can give you the feedback in real time? How do you handle that with your teams?
Yeah. So we take three approaches here. One, in if we're going to launch something and we need stakeholder feedback in a normal way that you're going to ship something to production, you get an isolated group. So, as an example, when we're launching the ARR reporting, recently did a business reporting prompt last week that can do our ARR roll forward, retention numbers, churn numbers, and do deeper analyses. The next step there is extensive testing because that needs to be really, really good.
Mm.
It ties to the board deck. So we would do a soft release we have a Rev Leaders channel, and I would just go, hey, name. We want you all to test this out for the next 2 weeks. Where there are
Okay.
bugs, let us know. And they'll typically do it in a private channel, but we can see the log of every request in the model. Two is the same way that we release everything in our release notes channel. This is a new feature that is accessible to the team, and this is where we make everybody aware. And then we'll probably talk about it in all hands from time to time when there's like really, really big changes. The third is through some public channels. We started with a CS and bonus GPT channel specifically because our first use cases were, to your point, related to CS and support, product questions and customer questions, and what is the participation rate for this customer, and it knows what participation rate calculations are, or they're prepping for a QBR. So it was logical to have a public space for them to just use bonus GPT. We spent a lot of time looking at every single answer because we have to
Yeah.
early, because a big part of ensuring is the formatting right. And those are the really, really small things that you tend to not think about all the time. Is that answer accurate? And there's a lot of fact checking on, is that answer accurate? And does it pass the bar that we have for accuracy over time, that we can trust it enough to continue to go and do this? When we launched the deal desk agent, it's the same. Are these red lines real? Are these aligned? Is this language okay? Does it mirror the language in our other contracts? Yes, fantastic. But my job is astronomically easier because now I can just see the answer and I can come back and say, yep, thumbs up, this is good. It takes me
Right.
5 seconds to go and do that compared to the 40 minutes to read the contract and go review all the details and write new language and like go back and forth on this. And did you ask that? And did you ask that? Like, it's a standard process. So that's how we've thought about deploying. But I am really interested in what is the how we AI Fridays? What does that look like?
It's something new our CRO came up with. So in our meetings, everybody, just at least one person, will share just kind of how they're using AI, what they're doing, whether it's personal, kind of like you said with that other chat channel, but it's just more in real time, sharing screens or just talking about it. And really, I think the broader teams are probably in a more of an early adoption phase, kind of more of just using chat gpt as like your Google, like replacing Google. So it's just, it's a window to kind of getting everybody to be thinking about how to be more efficient. Like at the end of the day, we want to challenge the norms and be open to new things. And what, and this is getting the rest of the leadership. And I think that's where some organizations that maybe aren't as AI first as yours, and we're an innovative company. Our products have AI in them, and so we kind of think like that. But I know there's lots of folks, and I was just at a conference, that struggle to get that buy-in with their leaders because there's still a lot of fear. And I just feel like there's so many missed opportunities. Like, obviously, there's ways around it because there are tools that have built in stuff. Like, if you already have Salesforce, you already have Gong, and you can kind of work within those. But to really maximize, I think having that leadership alignment is huge. So, even starting with something like, How I AI is a step towards that alignment. Um, and it sounds like you have that, right? Since you're an AI first company, in that, so that's a journey. I think people, one step at a time, need to start with leadership and work towards that. But what does so you're doing a lot, okay? And it sounds like a lot, but like, what's the reality of, you said it's you and JT, is that what you said? So there's two of you. I mean, do you have other folks on your team that are kind of maintaining this? And what does that look like? Your team and how you're moving forward with this and keeping things going and continuing to build.
Yeah. So I'll talk about how it's been and how I imagine it's going to start going. How it's been is JT and I will just build things where we can. We'll chat back and forth and say, hey, I'm working on this, I'm working on that. Here's a pull request. Can you go and review? We're going to add this in. Fantastic. It's out. And we're just finding space to go and do, because to your point, the organization being bought in is one thing, but formally focusing your time somewhere is a whole other piece. And a lot of that is getting a lot of signals. One signal is that, to the point, there's well over 3,000 questions that have been asked of Bonus GPT over the last few months. That is a strong signal that this is impactful to the business. But I have to quantify that. I have to roll that up to say, great, we're seeing better response times in intercom and greater customer satisfaction. We're seeing reps respond much more quickly to answers for prospects, and it's moving deals a little bit faster. Like, finding ways to use AI in your day to day, but then roll it up in conversations that say, hey, by the way, I happen to be using AI for A, B, and C, and this is working well. But that's kind of been how we've approached it. Is we initially started with this idea that we need to do, we need to share, we need to see as much as we can. Just build stuff. We're the two who are going to do. As we get new ideas, we'll continue to think about it. We won't hire somebody into this role. We won't buy a new solution until we see both the material value that we've built on our own and the opportunity for scale that goes beyond the threshold for the time and effort that we're willing to put in. Because again, it's just the two of us and we're working on all the other stuff. So in situations when JT's on call, he's not as available for bonus and
Mm-hmm.
GBT. In situations where ops is incredibly tied down, or the rewards team is about to ship a new iteration of an improvement to our catalog, I am not as bought into it. But it's great that we take the time to deploy things and see them working is absolutely amazing. Now, where are we going and how will this shift? I think more of my time, something that our CEO and I have been chatting a lot about is how do I shift my role? Not in the way that explicitly says my job is AI. My job is AI. It's revenue architecture, and AI is a way to get to that. Simply is a means to find our way to whatever the goal actually is. But more of my time will be focused on how do we deploy AI as we think about what changes in our hiring strategy. These are conversations that we're having with our people team much more consistently. Do we explicitly want to identify the doers who have some level of competence with these types of tools who can go and bring new solutions and teach us new things? We're not yet sure. And this is the in between for us. But I'm also curious about how things have been with your organization. Has
Mm-hmm.
there been this like real focus and desire to like how we AI is amazing? Has there been this focus to say, well, we want you to put an hour a day, a week into this in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I think the general thought is we want you to be more efficient, right? So I think that's the general thinking by leadership is how can we be more efficient? I also think just in general companies figure, well, if you're deploying AI, we can have less headcount. So I think it's a discussion around, like you mentioned, the people side and what does headcount look like? You do need headcount, right? You can't have AI without people. You need people to create the AI. Maybe there's a different ratio. Maybe it's 1 to 5. I don't know what that is. I don't know the right answer. But I think for us, it's this idea like we can be more efficient. We can do things that don't require manually looking things up. We can connect data. How can we rationalize things better and speed up time? So I think that's the general, at least in our company, that's the idea. Does everyone really know what that means? Leaning into it the way my 27-year-old stepson is like completely his whole life is run. Um, to me, those are two different things. And I think it depends on the company, depends on the generation of the leadership, right? Like I'm a Gen X person, okay? But I am on a mission to learn how to optimize and how to really understand the true value of AI and how it plays into RevOps. So like I'm in student mode now. I'm learning. I recognize that I might need to hire somebody, like you to come in and really build something out so I can focus on strategic. But I know this is the path to get there. And I know that focusing in like your deal desk example, like I know you and I talked about this before. Um, we started working on something internally with us. There are concerns about okay, we need to have enterprise level secure GPT type of solution. So I'm working with our head of IS on that. What does that look like? We have enterprise copilot set up that is safe and secure. So I'm working to build an agent within that, within the kind of constraints of what I'm able to do with the organization to keep things safe. But it's partnering with my IS department. And so I think you just have to, like you say, get started and dive in and pick a thing, right? So I've picked this legal thing that I want to research, and then another one is prospecting research, right, which is pretty basic, but Zoom Info does so much. We're rolling out Clay as well. So I'm in like Clay boot camp right now and just trying to really get immersed. But I know I need somebody on my team that's going to continue to run that and build it and continue to iterate and continue to build, because it's not something you can just like check a box.
Yep. There's a few things that are really interesting there. One is security is
Mm-hmm.
incredibly important in the tools that you use. For us, we opted for OpenAI because they're already one of our sub-processors, and I've been a sub-processor for product data. So it makes sense. But even in that, we have to have a lot of really strict guardrails. And
Mm.
one of the interesting tests that you do in evaling is axial coding. And the short of it is you create these like smaller categories. We're talking about like 5 or 6 core categories of outputs that should or should not happen.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, there should never be an output that contains any personal user information, ever.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yep.
That is a good category. And if there ever isn't any testing, this is an absolute fail. You have to go back and fix that. You ensure that guardrails are in every single one of your prompts. You think about all the things that could go wrong, but it's all the same as general security practices. The same organizational measures to ensure that you preserve the integrity of a user's data are employed as we're deploying different AI solutions. Two is I'm right there with you in the you have to just be willing to keep doing it. And I'll continue to say this again and again and again. A personal project that I'm working on is creating a mental map of how I think. It's interesting because I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
use an AI wearable device. Now,
Wow.
I'm not as fond of AI wearables for meetings with other people at this point in time. But for myself, it's really interesting. The human mind isn't meant to remember everything, which is why writing things down is incredibly important. But I also know there's a lot of things that I think about that relate to work and all the other random ideas that pop up that I never end up writing down. I try to use GPT as my first pass often. If I have an idea that I know that I need to come back to, I'm just going to use voice mode, GPT, talk about it, make this a summary, and I'm going to come back and read this at some point later in life. But it's not the most efficient way of organizing it. And again, it doesn't cleanly organize. And while GPT has memory, it doesn't have an extensive memory forever.
Mm-hmm.
So an experiment that I'm going to test is I'm going to get a limitless AI wearable. I'm going to put it on, go on walks, and I'm going to talk through different ideas that I have. It is going to connect to likely Google Notebook LLM, which can then create a mind map of the topics that I'm thinking about. And then you can dig into each of those topics because it does a really, really cool framework. You can dive into those and then create a write up or a readout of, hey, these are all the intricate thoughts. Kind of like I had a study guide of how I thought about things. And it's just an experiment to think, well, maybe that's interesting. Is there something that's actually there? And how could this then be applied in the future? But more of it is the desire to learn more about how to go in.
Wow, I am going to have you back so we can hear about how this goes. That it just is, I mean, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, RevOps or anything, that's truly a way to maximize your time, and then also just really get the most out of your thoughts. Like, it just sounds like a great, I mean, I do that a lot. Like, I do when I'm out walking and not on the, so in the wintertime I do the treadmill, so I listen to podcasts. But when it's warm enough for me to go outside and walk or jog, I tend to voice record my ideas, but I don't do it directly into Chat GPT. I'll take the transcript and then I'll dump it in. But I like your skipping a step, but I love this idea. So I want to hear how that goes for sure. I think we could go on and on and on, definitely. But I want to get to our rapid fire questions
Let's do it.
because I think it'll be fun. So I gave you a heads up on this. So we'll go through these. So I have 5 rapid fire questions I plan to ask every guest. So you're going to be the first here. What's the very first place you'd tell a RevOps team to start with AI?
Within the tools that you use and the process that you have today,
Love
by
it.
far is the first place to start.
Love it. Is RevOps data actually AI ready today, or are most teams just automating garbage?
I will say that there are some teams who've done an impeccable job ensuring that their data is in a great place, and for them, they're ready to go. I think the latter in many other cases, which is okay, and there's an obligation to take the time to go and get that data in a clean place because these tools are here to stay, and as they transform the way that we work, they need a really strong foundation to build upon.
Huge, huge. Okay, what's one AI use case in RevOps you've seen actually work in the real world?
The intercom fin support agent has been night and day difference to save so much time for our support team so they can then start only working on those tier 2 and tier 3 requests and give them the real time and attention that they need, which is an amazing win for that team.
That is huge. How do you measure real ROI from AI in RevOps?
You measure ROI the same way that you measure ROI from anything that you deploy. You look at it from a business perspective, a department perspective, team perspective, and a user perspective. Find the wins for each of those buckets. And then they should all naturally roll up to like, hey, it impacts this larger number or efficiency here or something that ends up on the P&L.
Very, very good. Will AI replace RevOps, or will RevOps leaders who use AI replace those who don't?
I think AI will replace the way that RevOps has existed, and it is on RevOps to play an active role in changing the future of this motion within an organization.
100%. These are great answers. And by the way, for folks listening, I got these questions by asking AI what are the top things that RevOps leaders are asking about AI. So this is relevant information. This is what people are asking, scraping all the socials and everything like that. So hopefully there's some useful items there. I mean, I've just learned a ton. And again, everybody, I'm on this AI education journey. So I'm excited to bring people like Amani onto the show. So just to do a quick wrap up here, can you give the audience some final thoughts around, taking AI and how to advance their knowledge and apply it to RevOps?
Yeah, the big takeaway is that AI is your teammate. It is your employee. It is your peer. It needs feedback, time, energy, and effort, but it'll become an incredibly highly performing part of your team that allows you to change the way that you work on a day-to-day basis. Embrace that change. Be okay with automating a part of the job that you have today and being thoughtful about what could your role actually turn into and what other areas of work could you go to. And when it comes to starting, start small. Do the smallest thing that you can possibly think about. Use an AI tool to update a deal property or to summarize a conversation notes or to store notes for all of your meetings. But think about the processes that you use day to day in your role and try to employ AI in some way to help you do that. And even if it's here, podcasts and using AI to come up with great questions. This is a phenomenal use case, and it starts just like that. You'll continue to learn, you'll continue to see, you'll continue to build, but it is the compounded, the work that you do will compound. And over time, you'll become far more competent in AI. And I'm much more excited that I know nothing. I've learned a lot, but I know nothing, and there's so much more to come.
That humble approach. I love it. Great advice. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm hoping actually if you could send me a couple of links, I will drop them in the show notes. I think you mentioned the Harvard class, and maybe even one of your playlists, your music playlists. Would love the resources to share. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you everyone for listening. This has been the first episode of AI Powered RevOps. I appreciate everybody listening and have a great day.